Hello students, welcome to the session of Open Elective course Public Relations and Advertising. In this session we continue with our discussion about public relations. We will be going deeply into the history of public relations, some cases where the discipline of public relations got properly defined, and also the emergence of corporate communication as a result of the developing discourse of public relations. And towards the end of the session, we'll be looking at different concepts which are very integral to public relations, such as what is publicity and what is propaganda. And towards the tail end of the session, we'll be also looking at digital public relations. So let's get started. Now, in the previous class, we mentioned the name of one Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is considered as a pioneer in the field of public relations because he wrote the book called Crystallizing Public Opinion, which opened the two-way street or the two-way communication channel that is required for understanding and executing a perfect public relations campaign. So how to exercise PR, he's the one who actually did quite a lot of research on that and actually brought out many channels in which we can actually practice it and the importance of public relations in the 20th century. Now, he's referred to in his obituary as the father of public relations. And it presented the concept of a two-way street between a company and a public in his groundbreaking 1923 book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, like I said. And he basically applied quite a lot of psychoanalytic techniques and the use of mass psychology and social sciences to back up what he was actually trying to tell about how to deal with the public en masse. So ad campaigns, press statements, etc. Whatever we say nowadays is quite literally based on the concepts that he had developed in the 20s and how to actually influence public opinion and make sure that what you're trying to say, whether it be trying to sell a product or a subscription to an idea, they're all based on what he was actually trying to achieve in terms of solidifying public relations as a discipline. So one of his quotes which goes, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it? The recent practice of propaganda has proved that it is possible, at least up to a certain point and within certain limits. He later called the scientific techniques of opinion molding the engineering of consent. Now, what does that actually mean? What does that quote mean? It actually says that he says there is a certain way in which you can actually influence public opinion, and propaganda, which we will discuss about later in the session, is one of the key aspects that he saw, that selling a message aggressively from a certain point of view has influenced public opinion, and there are cases during his lifetime which he bases on to tell that yes, it can be done not just for large scale political purposes but also for corporate and business oriented ways of speaking, etc. So he was actually telling that you can influence the opinions of masses and you can control and regiment. Sounds very, all these words usually have a negative connotation when you are trying to achieve any kind of behavioral change of how the people think about something. But still, he's the one who actually did scientific research on it and came up with a lot of techniques which are now, like I said, the basis of our understanding of public relations. He called it engineering of consent. You are actually producing goodwill by sheer tactics and by putting forward certain viewpoints which bring about the consent of the public towards certain ideas. Now, one case study that is very famous I referred to in the previous session was when he started working for American Tobacco Company. At that time, the tobacco industry was one of the leading industries in the world, and he was given the objective of increasing Lucky Strike, which is one common cigarette brand from the 20s and 30s, sales among women. Like I said, they wanted to expand their market. Any brand would always try to expand their market within the existing population. Two things that they would do is maintain whatever brand loyalty that they have, retain the brand and the health of the brand in the eyes of the people who are already consumers, but also try to expand their market share to bring in more people who would buy the product. Now, in this case, it was women. Lucky Strike sales among women who, for the most part, had formerly avoided smoking. Now, the picture that you see is the girl in red advertisement I was talking about. It is shot by a photographer called Nicholas Murray, enlisted by Bernays to help popularize feminine thinness and cigarette smoking. It had a two-prong approach. He was looking at what the definition of beauty is among women, trying to create a certain persona and adding a certain brand or a product associated with that persona. The first strategy was to persuade women to smoke cigarettes instead of eating. So he's telling that you want to be thin, you want to look beautiful because that is apparently the new definition of what beauty is. So stop eating too much and actually smoke a lot more. All these are now in our cultural context and in our socio-cultural perspective, what in the timeline that we live in right now. In our lifetimes, both these things are now told to be. You don't. We know the concept of what body shaming is. We understand that every individual is different in that sense, and the fundamental fact that smoking can lead to death and cause very deadly diseases such as lung cancer. But at that time, these things were not even under consideration. So he actually brought out this ideal of thinness by using a lot of photographers, artists, different kind of media, hard copy media to promote the special beauty of thin women. So they were actually trying to tell medical authorities to promote it, and in many ways he was using a lot of new techniques that are not new now, but at that time they were very innovative to prefer cigarettes over sweets. So homemakers were cautioned that keeping cigarettes on hand was a social necessity. They were told that to look busy, to make sure that you need it. It was what they actually were trying to do at that point. For the simple reason that they need to make more people buy it. At one glance, this is advertising, but at the same time, this is some sort of a public relations exercise to promote your brand and to get entry into new markets. Now, it is around this time that you have the depression there in the US, which sort of affected the whole world, the late 20s. And one of the famous pictures that came out of the depression era was pictures actually, in fact, were people standing in long queues waiting for basic rations, food, supplies, fuel, everything. So you can see from the picture that in the background there's a huge poster which claims that they have the world's highest standard of living. There's no way like the American way. Yet you see a huge crowd actually standing in front in queues for these rations. So what did the industry actually want? The industry wanted to take hold of people's imagination and say that no, we are not in a depression, there is an upturn and we are coming back and we still have the world's highest standard of living. That poster is a huge PR exercise. Now, during the height of depression, the National Association of Manufacturers (NAM) became the first industry trade association to create a PR department, a set of people within an organization entirely devoted to creating a certain message which would improve public attitudes towards the businesses. The campaign included movie shots, leaflets, a radio serial, and a daily column. Now you see that they're using film as a medium. They're using hard copy, print media. They're using broadcast radio, and they're using a daily column, which is another print media. So they're using different tools of advertising to sell a message that we are still one of the best countries in the world in terms of standard of living and public's attitude towards business. They wanted to shape it in such a way that no, the depression is a past gone thing. We are actually moving forward very fast. So this is how corporate PR actually started shaping up. Now, during the World War II era, I don't know if a lot of people know it, but the German Nazi regime had a Ministry of Propaganda itself. Now, what is propaganda? We'll discuss it in detail, but I'll just give you a small, brief idea of what propaganda is. We hear the word everywhere. Propaganda is basically single point aggressive message where you're telling the people that this is the truth and this is the objective truth, when in fact it is very obviously from a certain point of view. Posters from World War II, like I said, are very um, I mean, they are collectibles now. It was that impactful at that point of time during the 30s and 40s. So a variety of PR techniques. These posters were some kind of a public relations exercise because they're telling people to either enlist in the army, not lose faith in the country. They're telling people to buy more things, telling people to contribute to the economy. They're asking people to join more jobs. So it is a sort of how do you say PR exercise to keep the image of the when it comes to politics and World War II politics at that time and the countries that were involved, all the PR exercises were focused with a single point agenda to make sure that our country is actually fighting this war and doing the best, and we need you to join and help us do that. So, because it's a warlike situation, you would have different countries approaching it in different way. The brand whose health is now in concern at this point is the nation, the idea of that nation itself. So in Germany, Goebbels headed the propaganda movements for Hitler. He was ensuring all communication was in support of the Nazis regime. And across the Atlantic, the US created the Office of War Information to censor war news, document social change, and create a central means for government to communicate about the war. So any information about the war essentially went through the government, and they were actually carefully making sure what goes to the people or not. Basically, they are mediating information exchange from a certain source to the public. So in that sense, it is public relation at its core. They are maintaining how communication channels are operating between a certain entity or a certain brand and a whole lot of people who constitute the mass or the public at that time. Post the World War II era, and in the 60s, when you have the hippie revolution, you have the Vietnam War, and a lot of things, people started using PR as a way to overcome a lot of issues that they faced, such as racial issues, gender issues, educational issues, anti-war slogans, a lot of things that people actually started wanted to actually tell to the powers that be. They started using similar PR exercises. Posters, buttons, anthems, chants, everything were actually in vogue at that time, and a lot of people came up with a lot of slogans that we still use now. Make love, not war, for example. We shall overcome. A lot of things at that point, including normal people, were starting to use public relations as one way of actually responding to any kind of propaganda tactics that governments were using. So, moving on to the 80s, PR became a completely added another completely different skill set where they're trying to do damage limitation, or what is called as crisis communication in corporate communication circles. Now, one case study that is given is Johnson Johnson's Tylenol capsules, which were based, which caused the death of 7 people. Now, working with the police, the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration is what I'm thinking the full form is, and the media, they issued a nationwide recall, delivered warnings, and created new tamper-proof packaging. Johnson & Johnson's handling of the tragedy set a standard and remains a model for effective crisis response and corporate responsibility. Now, the whole perception of what public relations are, even for us now, is understanding how teams within organizations sort of manage how when crisis is actually prop up, to make sure that the central theme, health of the brand, is not affected. So that becomes the function of the public relations from the 80s onwards. For almost all organizations, there is a dedicated team and a PR department to actually take care of any ill will or ill reputation that comes across their parent organization. Johnson & Johnson's handling of this case is one of the hallmark cases of understanding how public relations took on this mantle of being the people who actually gave out messages that would maintain the image of the brand regardless of whatever was happening outside. Now, you have the rise of integrated media, where you have different companies joining into this whole market of public relations firms. They're specializing in actually advertising, marketing, and public relations. We mentioned some of them earlier in the starting when we were discussing about advertising agencies. Publicis Group, WPP, and Omnicom Group, one of some of the big four, and these are now some of the biggest public relations firms in the world. So they sort of work through media, work in tandem with different kinds of media, and make sure that they handle portfolios of the largest organizations in the world, of the most important individuals in the world, and they give tailor-made solutions for all kinds of requirements when it comes to public relations, and they are the biggest players in this whole market. Now, moving on to nowadays, or a seminal moment in what public relations was and is, and I think will be in the future, is the advent of social media into the scene. The understanding that the definition of public is actually changing once you start linking everybody together, and the flow of information is not entirely mediated as it was 60, 70 years back through only government channels or through corporate means. It is still corporate in a way, but the connections that are thrown around by people and the networking done amongst people made information flows much more democratic, and it made the information flow faster and wider. So public relations had to take this also as a discipline, are people who are practicing public relations, PR professionals, so to say, had to actually understand the use of social media and how people actually interact within social media, and to understand the whole landscape and how it can be used to actually send messages in a certain way. So the 2008 election of Barack Obama is one of the famous instances when all these social media platforms were harnessed to bring out a certain message and leading to his victory in the elections. So the public relations profession took a leadership role in social media's use and development as a two-way communication tool, because you get quite a lot of feedback from social media directly without having to go with a board and a pen and ask them what do you really think about it. So you get live feedback of what is going on. You get to know how people think as a group, within a certain community, outside a certain community, within a geography, outside a certain geography. So the scale at which people were actually interacting with each other and towards organizations and high profile individuals was starting to change a little bit, because not change a little bit, but change very drastically over a period of time. When we think about all these, the rise of corporate communication, where we are right now, a central theme in all these things is the public. Now, uh, how we actually manage the information and how we actually do it is what public relations does. But what is the core concept that lies below all of these things? What is the abstract idea? The abstract idea is a word called publicity. We hear it getting thrown left, right, and center in many places. So what really is publicity? So there is a saying that any publicity is good publicity. Basically, if you get a bad news also about something, then it is said that, oh, because something bad happened, now we are hearing that name again. So that's a general idea of our understanding of what publicity is. So publicity refers to any information presented to the general public in the media that has a potential to change public opinion of a brand, company, individual, or a product, and also an idea also. So it is any information. It doesn't have to be mediated or tailored or presented in a certain format, but any information that changes or has the potential to change the public opinion can be called as publicity. Publicity serves to create awareness or build credibility about an entity through news, press releases, event information, and other forms of communication. Since the main goal of publicity is to gain any amount of media coverage, it often has a narrow focus. So, narrow focus in the sense it might deal with the publicity of an individual, it might deal with the publicity of an organization regarding a certain uh, event, or let's say of a certain happening in a place, or how they are actually dealing with the problem. So it is more general as compared to public relations, but still it has a narrow focus pertaining to certain events and happenings around a certain place. Publicity aims at spreading the information or news to the maximum number of people in minimum time. Your whole goal is to reach a lot of or more people with a certain information. It is a non-paid form of communication which is not under the control of the company, which is why we say there is a lot of bad publicity around something, because there are no bad public relations. There is no bad PR, because PR essentially is done for the good of the company. But there is bad publicity where something bad happens. That is bad publicity, because you get people in the public are getting to know about something bad that happened to that place. So publicity can be bad also. Therefore, it can be said that it is a non-paid form of in communication, which is not under the control of any company, individual, organization, etc. So as an example given, it can be a positive review regarding a product given by a satisfied customer, or information published in the newspaper regarding the quality of its services provided by a company, or it can be a simple word of mouth action also. So it can be anything, like I said, it can be positive review, it can be a negative review which affects the brand, which is when public relation exercises kick in. So in a nutshell, publicity has nothing to do with the company's sales, which is exactly what public relations is. Public relations is all to do with the company's sales and revenue, and trying to build a better brand, and through that build more goodwill if it's an individual, more subscription if it's an idea, and more revenue if it's an organization with a product. It is all about creating awareness in general public through editorial or unbiased comments concerning a product, service, or an idea. So what are the differences between publicity and public relations? The difference between publicity and public relations can are given below. Publicity can be described as public visibility, wherein user information is communicated to the general public. On the other extreme, the term public relations, as the name suggests, is a strategic management tool that aims to create a company's positive image in the eyes of the public. Just like we just told now, public relations exercise is done completely to make sure that the brand is not affected. Whereas publicity is something that just happens, can be good or bad. What you do after that is what public relations is. While publicity is not under the control of the company, Public relations is fully under the company's control because it's a strategic management tool. You're managing a situation, you're managing a certain image. Like I said, publicity can be positive or negative in the sense that it can be positive or negative feedback regarding the product or service. Whereas public relations is always positive because it is very tightly managed, very tightly controlled, and very tightly exercised and expressed by the public relations department of the company. The publicity is free of cost as it is made by a third party. I don't fully agree to that because companies actually do something without realizing or without doing it as a public relations exercise. However, publicity in general is free of cost. Um, what happens, and there is no money involved in actually making that happen. If there is money involved and a PR team involved in happening, then that is public relations. As against in the case of public relations, the company incurs money to organize events, sponsor programs, third-party endorsements, etc. Organizing events, sponsoring programs, third-party endorsements, all these are public relations exercises. Publicity involves gaining the attention of the media that communicates any information or news regarding a product, service, person, organization, etc. so as to create awareness in people. In contrast, public relations seeks to attract the target audience for the purpose of boosting the company's sales. It's the same thing that we discussed right now. Now, another very important concept in understanding public relations is propaganda. The word has a very bad rap, and for good reason as well, because propaganda itself has a very negative connotation from where it comes from. It's a World War II war era Nazi tool that people used to actually convert people's opinions at that time. So, what is propaganda? We'll go through the definition and break it down. Propaganda is communication that is primarily used to influence or persuade an audience to further an agenda, which may not be objective and may be selectively presenting facts to encourage a particular synthesis or perception, or using loaded language to produce an emotional rather than a rational response to the information that is being presented. Sounds quite a lot, but when we break it down, you will get the gist of it. So, propaganda is also communication in a different form. And what is it used for? It's used to influence or persuade an audience to further an agenda. Persuasion word comes when it comes to advertising also and public relations also, but propaganda is much more aggressive in trying to persuade an audience to subscribe to an idea. It seeks to influence much more, let's say, heavily. And propaganda is never objective. I mean, it might be perceived as an objective thing, but it is always selectively presenting facts to encourage a certain perception or back a certain point of view. How do they do that? Using loaded language, or visual material or slogans, etc., to produce an emotional response rather than a rational response that anybody who listens to it. So it's very single-minded. It's a point of view based opinion that is told as the fact itself and is given to people to influence or persuade them to that idea. Now, this is a very famous poster that a lot of people use for as an example of propaganda because Uncle Sam pointing at you straight looking dead in your eyes, into your eyes. This is one of the most classic cases of propaganda posters from the World War II era, where he's telling that you need to enlist to make sure that your nation is actually doing well. On both sides of the war, people were using different kinds of posters and different kinds of visual material. There is a German Nazi poster where you can see different elements within that. You can see the rebuilding of a nation, where you can see the kid with the pickaxe, the father who is also a worker with the hammer in his hand, and the lady who is also an industrial worker. And you can see the city behind with the flag of the Nazi party in their hands. Propaganda can be found in news and journalism, government advertising, entertainment, education, and activism, and is often associated with material which is prepared by governments as part of war efforts, like the ones that you've seen right now. Political campaigns, health campaigns, revolutionaries, big businesses, ultra religious organizations, the media, and certain individuals such as soapboxes. Now, all these put together are channels which propagate different kinds of messages. Now, how do you how do you actually understand what the message is? and how do you actually read what the message is. Now that is where propaganda comes in, and that is where they actually involve quite a lot of tactics and techniques to actually tailor the message in such a way that the people who are reading it believe that that is the truth and actually subscribe that idea very fast. And it is very sharp and very aggressive, and it is always a selective presentation of facts. This poster is quite famous when it comes to World War II context from an Indian perspective, because as you can see, it is actually Bengali that is written there. I'm assuming that is Bengali or Hindi. I think both are there. Now, this poster was designed by the Japanese, who were actually fighting at our Eastern Front against the British in the 40s as part of the World War II expansion program. They were trying to burst into the subcontinent through Burma, and they designed quite a lot of posters which was aimed at the Indian public, and they were telling them to take care of the Britishers who were oppressing them. So in this poster, you can see that there is a lady holding the dead body of her son, I'm assuming, and a lot of dead bodies around them. But in the background, you can see that there is a lot of people with pitchforks, with a whip, with the white figures in the back, with a sickle, and the flag of the Indian Republic, let's say, because it is not formed at that time of the Indian, the tricolor with the chakra in the middle, which is the representation of what the country was before its formation. And they're driving out the British soldiers, who you can see on the left side of the image in the background in white. So this was something that Japanese were aiming to actually build influence within or build support within the Indian forces, Indian people, the common people, and make sure that they were on their side when the Japanese were actually pushing the British out from that point. Now, in this picture, you would not see any Japanese soldiers because they would be marked as outsiders also. But you're seeing that the Indians are actually driving out. The common people are driving the British out from there. And there is a carnage of Indian people showing the suffering that they have with the mother and child, but at the same time, they are fighting to drive the British out. It is fascinating that this is a Japanese poster. It has been used not only in India, it has also been used in Japan to show that they are doing something for the Indian people against the British. This is how propaganda works. You know, if you go to historians and historical facts, they will tell that wherever Japan has gone and invaded and led conquest during that period, they've been far more aggressive than what they actually show through their posters. But what they are actually telling through these posters is a completely different thing. So that is how propaganda works. Propaganda is so pervasive that most people experience it on a regular basis and often don't even notice. It works in the shadows to control public perception, effectively influencing political campaigns, spending allocations, corporate gains, and everything in between. Propaganda tactics can be found almost everywhere. You saw the list of things earlier. Advertising in public relations, marketing, politics, social media, uh, any kind of channel through which information flows can be used for spreading propaganda. Before we go to digital PR, it is actually important to understand that propaganda is another means of communication, and our keen-eyed or open-eyed, vigilant approach towards understanding whatever communication comes our way will help us understand what is propaganda and what is not. A single point view or a single point argument about anything is not really healthy. You would need multiple sources or debate about things. So fighting propaganda is also part of understanding your job as a person who understands how public relations works. Now, these are two concepts that are very central to public relations. We move on to digital PR, which is rooting public relations within the space that we are in right now. So, what is digital PR? In a digital world, we have to understand how public relations is exercised in the digital space also. So, digital PR is a promotional tactic used by marketers to increase a brand's online presence. It is measurable and tangible, and it is measurable and tangible. It is a strategy to driving brand awareness, traffic to a website, links which boost organic rankings, sales, social following, and engagement. It's sort of similar to what web-based marketing and social media marketing that we talked about earlier. But digital PR in that sense is much more focus driven. There is a lot of technology associated with it, understanding of digital spaces and how people behave in online spaces. So, what you can actually do is try to understand digital PR from the perspective of the spaces that you yourself are actually inhabiting. So social media, for example, you can see that any kind of incident that is involving an organization or an individual, you can see that they always put out statements straight away to either corroborate what has happened or deny what has happened or try to put out the fire or boost whatever image that they have. They use different kind of digital products. They use different kind of writing. They try to see what can be done. So content marketers use digital PR to get their content seen by millions. Marketers use digital PR to get their products in front of a direct audience. Founders use digital PR to create hype around their launch and be positioned as an expert. Video creators use digital PR to drive views and build authority. So they're all exercises of public relations in different ways by different people. Content marketers, founders, video creators, etc. They all use these digital spaces which behave completely differently from the ways in which propaganda or publicity or different kinds of traditional corporate communications channels were being used before. It is a widely used tactic which involves applying the principles of traditional PR to promote content, stories, brands, products online. It's used as a way of staying ahead and standing out. How does it compare to traditional PR is also something that we have to look at. Traditional PR involves networking with journalists. Now, traditional PR exercising is basically through press conferences, press releases, media tours, different kind of press conferences for that matter, and different kinds of ways in which they used to interact with the public. At one time, the goal of a publicist, who is a PR official, who specialized in traditional PR, was to get their clients included in newspapers, magazines, radio, and television. Very commonly used media. You would make sure that your organization or the person who you are doing PR for is in within the vision of the public in a good way. So most people who are specialized in traditional PR have shifted their focus to include digital PR because of the relevance of the digital spaces and often find higher readerships or viewership on online content than offline. Even though that traditional PR still remains a forte of many journalists and many individuals also. Uh, with the growth of the internet, there are many more possible avenues to use to promote a business. Digital PR includes a wide variety of marketing possibilities, such as being interviewed by online publications, increasing your online presence, and using the interactive power of social media for further growth and recognition. Usual advantages of what online spaces are when compared to traditional spaces such as a newspaper column, television program, etc. The kind of audience is different, the reach is different, the cost incurred is completely different, and the way that you talk and express within digital spaces is also completely different. So, if the way that you talk and express is completely different, then the way you actually perform public relations also will be different. Digital PR specialists use a wide variety of tactics to improve a client's web presence. Some examples are preparing online press releases instead of the traditional press releases you have otherwise, building relationships with online journalists and bloggers to generate online press coverage, people who are very prominently within digital spaces, arranging business profiling. Business profiling is to do with understanding how their presence is online, seeing what they're actually into quite a lot, basically trying to see what their connections are over the digital spaces. Organizing online reviews and interviews, ensuring press releases are optimized with relevant links back to your website. This benefits readers with links to more information and gives your search rankings a boost by securing high authority links to your website from high traffic blogs and news sites. Now, traffic is the keyword here. Like I said, the more clicks, the more views, the more clicks, the more revenue generated through advertising. Influencer marketing and blogger outreach to attain mention of on influential social media accounts and blogs. Social media influencer culture is something that is pretty huge now, and the economic model of that is, I mean, it's way effective than any other ones in social media nowadays. Publishing online content to gain a wider reputation and high quality backlinks. Now, online content is by far very huge when compared to traditional content volume. Spaces are increasing exponentially, and there is a larger reach for whatever you're doing in online spaces rather than traditional spaces. So public relations also acts through online spaces to get the maximum reach and to make sure that the message that you want to tell in your way, in your own format, and from your own perspective can be given to or shared to or spread through a lot more connections and networking done online rather than the traditional ways in which we used to do public relations. So for this class, we'll move on to the next topic in the next session. Thank you.